Hi, my name is Eric George, and I have been asked to come and speak a little bit about religion in schools and kind of what a policy should look like guiding a school district. So, the purpose is the school board is looking at updating our policies. So, they asked me as a neutral party to come in and to try to present some of the information as clearly and concisely. First, I'll be looking at some of the recent news headlines that have been talking about religion in schools. Then we'll look at the Pew Report on religion in schools. And lastly, the U.S. Department of Education guidance. So, the public debate surrounding uh, religion in schools has fired up again. Recently, President Trump has come out and spoken in defense of students who feel they cannot pray at school. There has been a school-sponsored prayer ban since 1962, and many of the advocates for school prayers that students are being attacked and discriminated for wanting to pray. However, advocates on the other side are saying that lines are getting blurred between what school prayer is. Recently, an Alabama football team had the entire team baptized. Um, Whereas proponents of President Trump's message are advocating for empowering students that they can better show and represent their faith. So, first, we get into the Pew Research on what exactly is going on within schools. And a recent survey of American teens found that 53% of teens say they often see students wearing religious symbols in and around school. Okay, so religion is still very widespread and prevalent in school. In the case I alluded to earlier, Engel versus Whittle, um, this is the Supreme Court case that put a ban on openly having the schools lead religious um, prayer and religious things within public schools. We've often seen the more prevalent debate about schools and what should kind of be done with the teaching of religion, and the main debate surrounding that has been the kind of the creation versus evolution debate. And right here in Kansas, it's something that um, came to the forefront of national headlines earlier in the 2000s. So, what is appropriate? How much should this religious influence be, and how much should this scientific approach be? Another issue that kind of comes up around religion in schools is how do you study the Bible? Currently, the guideline and the expectation is you can teach it as a text, as a work, but teaching it as a way of like, hey, these are the lessons in the Bible, you should listen to it type of thing, that's still not allowed. And then Pew goes in to talk about what exactly rights of students look like, how they can engage in their beliefs, what kind of actions they can have, and things like that. So they talk about how, as long as students are acting on their own, they have the same right to engage in any religious activity and discussion that they would do in other secular situations. They also may take the time to offer prayer or blessing before meals in school or on school grounds. They also, where they kind of are limited, um, and this is, for the better, is students may not engage in religious harassment or compel other students to participate in regular religious expression. So they cannot force other students or be aggressive in trying to get them to follow their religion. And schools may neither favor nor disfavor student groups based on religious biases. Next, we kind of look at what exactly are the rights of parents. And the biggest right surrounding parents when it comes to religion is the opt out ability. So, if parents feel that certain education or certain ideas go against their religious beliefs and kind of hinder that education, they have the first right to determine what their children's education is. So, they have the right to opt out of certain lessons, certain classes, certain activities. Um, Next, we get to the rights of staff when it comes to religion. And the main thing with this is staff are free to, wear religious symbols and kind of, if asked about their religion, answer those questions, but they cannot actively ask students to help participate or come participate in their religion. But they are free to just kind of go about their um, normal day with it. And then lastly, one of the murkiest and one of the most challenging things the Pew looks at is equal access questions. Um, what do school religious groups look like? What kind of rights do they have? Can they uh, dictate students' beliefs who join those groups? And how is the school supposed to provide facilities for them? All sorts of kind of questions like these. And it talks about how um, ultimately these groups oftentimes do have final say on their, you know, leaders and kind of what qualifications the leadership of that body might have. And it also asks that schools do provide spaces, for these clubs, just as if they would provide space for any other club. Kind of think of it in that light. So, from the Pew Research, we look at the U.S. Department of Education guidance on religion. Um, and it breaks down into three main categories. So, applying the governing constitutional principles in particular contexts related to prayer, applying the governing principles in particular contexts related to religious expression, and as we were just talking about, the Equal Access Act. So, in relations to prayer, the U.S. Department of Education has multiple guidelines for different things. So, for example, in moments of silence, schools are allowed to provide moments of silence, but they cannot encourage or discourage students from praying. They have to provide accommodation for prayer. During instructional time. So, for example, if a student is observing Ramadan, then it would be acceptable for them to fulfill their religious obligations. Um, Talks about the role students, teachers, and other school employees can have. And again, we kind of touched on that with the Pew access. Um, and another big issue and something that has come up often is prayer during graduation or ceremonies. And the Department of Education is uh, laid out guidelines that they cannot mandate these. So basically, the overall guidelines of these is if it's an overall school assembly, um, they cannot mandate prayer and they cannot require students to pray. But if students on their own time or free time want to form their own group, club, or pray on their own, then that cannot be hindered in any way. Okay. Next, we go on to talk about religious expression. Um, so this addresses what kind of religious literature can be talked about, how religion should be taught, dress code policies, and religious excusal. So religious literature, again, it can be used as a way to, if it's treated as a part of the school curriculum for specific classes, um, but it cannot be permitted as a way to proselytize and things like that. Again, religion may be taught, um, but it is being taught about religion rather than teaching that religion. That's the key difference. If you are talking about a religion instead of teaching the religion, then it is okay to be taught in schools, um, so on and so forth. And then lastly, the Equal Access Act we kind of touched on earlier. Students, again, have to be given this equal opportunity to form their own clubs, have access to student grounds, have a ability to publicize their meeting just as any other club or school backed institution would have. So these are some of the guidelines and expectations. Hopefully this is helpful in determining what exactly we want our policies to look like. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask, and I'm happy to answer. And then lastly, we have the references.